So here we are, our second session of 2025 in a world that has either gone upside down or right side or left side or who knows. It's a strange time. But then again, when I think about it as a historian, having read history all the way back to whenever, classical times, I don't think there was ever any time that was not strange. It,
Yeah,
it's the human experience.
it's the lack of frame of reference we have today. We
Yeah,
think what we're going through is something brand new to the
yeah,
species.
yeah, yeah,
Like this has never happened before.
yeah. It's the first time, and oh, how are we going to get through it?
It's the first time humanity has faced an existential crisis. I'm like, oh, really? You
Really?
probably should spend time in a
Exactly.
library.
Exactly. Actually, as part of this, just as a total aside, one of my directors is a English teacher at the high school level in Winnipeg. I may have mentioned this, maybe even last week. And he and I exchanged things because I used to teach English at the university, English literature. And I ran across a posting that was research done on medieval university students. And it was a brilliant posting. I thought, holy, one of my backgrounds is I studied Middle Ages or medieval time period history. And what the study showed was that most university students in the Middle Ages were about 14 years old, adolescents. Okay. Adolescents away from parents and in cities where they were just gonzo.
Yeah.
But I mean, and by the way, adolescents in the 13th, 14th, 15th century, no different from adolescents now.
Nope. Nope.
Cannot communicate with them. They have the same attitudes,
The
so on
same
and so forth.
drivers.
Oh yeah, oh totally. Except that this, by the way, was a study in Oxford, adolescents or university students in Oxford, and someone combed the records of the riots and the number of murders that occurred in the University of Oxford, mostly males killing males in gangs with knives and clubs because they drank, they hooed around, you name it. They
Yep.
were adolescents and they were free to do anything they wanted because they had nobody in control or controlling them. And so Oxford became a murder capital driven by adolescent culture.
Brings a whole new meaning to sending your kid away to college.
Oh, totally, totally. So what did I do? I related this to the very serious, dark play, Shakespeare's play of Hamlet. Who's Hamlet? God damn it, he's a murderer.
Yep.
What the heck does he do in the first few scenes? Never mind the final scene when everybody dies.
Yeah.
He kills people.
Hmm.
All right, and you sit back and you go, what the heck was Bill doing here? He was talking about a university student who came home to mourn his father, whose entire Oedipal control mechanism was not about his mother, but was about killing the king, his father. And so there's a trail of blood throughout the whole first part of the play that I went, connecting it to this study at Oxford University in, the 14th, 15th century, I thought, yeah, yeah, Bill was spot on. Bill
Yep.
Shakespeare was saying, um, I don't write for academics in ivory towers in the 20th and 21st century who are going to psychologize in a Freudian way the Oedipal complex of this character who
He
walks
makes
around.
theater out of real life experiences.
And that is actually what drove me to think this way.
Yeah.
Shakespeare was an entrepreneur who was an entertainer who actually died relatively wealthy as a middle class person. Right? He wasn't senior, he wasn't, military, he wasn't whatever, but he died wealthy, which means he was very successful as an entertainer, not as a psychologist.
No, and he probably, and he, as far as I know, he never was. He never intended to be. He didn't put that facade up
No,
whatsoever.
no,
He
he wasn't.
provided,
Yeah,
wrote great theater based upon real world experiences that
that's right.
provided exceptional entertainment
That's right.
to the world as it existed when he wrote it.
Exactly. And you would have to ask, well, who was his primary target? It was the people in the pit, right? We think of, it's the people who think, or people who are,
Oh,
the
no.
elites up on the balconies. No, 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 no. It's the people in the pit. Why? They're the ones who are the largest crowd, even if they're spending pennies. How do you make money as an entrepreneur? Pennies. Somebody comes into your organization, buys a pack of gum, and you have a profit automatically. And that's the SME, small, medium enterprise, of which
And you convince
right.
other people to deliver it
Exactly.
because he didn't act out his play.
No, no,
Actors did his
that's
theater.
right.
He sat back and watched the theater happen.
That's right.
And
That's
then
right.
when you replicate that in various different sites, you're replicating the income streams.
Exactly. And there are two things that got to be when you think of Shakespeare's so boring. No, no, we teach it in a boring way. Okay, that's a
Oh yeah.
different issue.
Oh yeah.
He's not boring. He's actually racy. He's actually kind of off the wall, even for his own time. When you think about the opening scenes of at least three of his plays, there's a ghost. Now, I think about this in terms of 21st century movies. What actually grips you to go to the theater? Something really weird.
Yeah.
Somebody, who's going to have, knives and, stab you to death or whatever, slice them, dice them movies. All right. What attracts young people to the theater?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, or to movies? Well, it isn't some great head trip. So there's a ghost in Hamlet. There are witches in Macbeth. Now, opening scenes at the time, this would have had the crowd go,
The
whoa,
hook that a book uses that an author tells you about.
exactly.
I watched a bit of a masterclass once, and the author said you need a hook.
Yep,
And he read one example from one of his books was they decided to kill the young girl first.
yes, yes,
Everybody wants to read what happens next.
yes, exactly, exactly.
It's not, 17 syllable academic words.
No, no,
It's written in a way
yep,
that catches the reader's interest and holds them. It's like if you're going to throw a play and you want people to stay, because
yep,
there's no requirement for them to stay,
no, no,
you have to hook them right at the beginning,
yep. And
firmly plant them in their seats.
yeah, it leads to something else that was an insight that I just learned recently, and we'll move the conversation into things that people think are more important. But I think this is the fun part, and that is the origin of the term "break a leg." All right, well, we think of break a leg as a wish to an actor, so that if you wish them something negative, they will end up being positive. So it's that whole spooky thing. Well, it's not. Break a leg actually has an origin in Renaissance theater, and in particular with Shakespeare. And you go, where the hell does it come from? Well, the people in the pit had chairs that they sat on, or stools. And if they liked the performance, they didn't clap. They banged their chairs on the floor. And if
Oh,
the
nice.
leg of the chair broke, that meant it was a successful performance.
Ah, break a
You go,
leg.
whoa, break
Nice.
a leg. You want to get out there and you want them to go crazy to the point where they break a leg on the chair.
Yeah.
That is a good performance. And so, these are the things that, in our off hours when we think about, when we don't even think, when we just want to relax, you go, oh, I'm thinking about, Hamlet as a murderer. Okay, good. Good for you, Victor. Uh,
Well,
yeah,
I think it represents a bigger question about revisionist history, where everybody tries to look at history through the lens of the 21st century experience and
yes,
then make judgments about people's actions and
yep,
decisions at the time,
yep,
right?
yeah,
Um, we see this. In my job as a part-time professor, I face this where people are saying, "Well, they just weren't aware, they didn't know better in 1960." Like, no, in 1960, they were very well aware. They were just living in a different set of circumstances.
yes,
One that you're probably not taking the time to understand
right,
by imposing your
right,
lens on very
right,
specific experiences in 1960.
yeah,
And I had this context of, the evolution of I work in the emergency management preparedness field. That comes out of the Civil War or the Civil Defense era and the Cold
right,
War. So we
right.
study the origins to really understand why.
Mhm.
And people make that circumstance, and it goes all the way back, right? Like, judging what people did in 1820.
Right,
You realize 1820 was still all about survival,
yes,
that the majority of families were simply trying to honestly make it through winter.
yes,
Then the starving season, which was the first part of the spring until
right,
the plants flourished,
exactly,
right? People
exactly.
were literally hoping that 4 of their 5 kids would survive this
Yep,
winter.
yep. And that's why you had 5 kids.
You had 7 kids because you wanted 4 to reach adulthood.
Yeah, yeah. And,
Imagine that concept in the 21st century now, telling the
oh,
average Canadian family that a third
oh,
of your children are likely not to make it,
no, no.
right?
The origins of my family are my father uh was number, well, I don't know what the number was. He came from a family of 8 siblings. Only 4 lived to adulthood. 4 died either at birth or very early. My his youngest sibling, his brother, actually nearly died of rheumatic fever. Right. And the only way they treated it when he was this kid was to quarantine him and see if he lived.
Yeah.
It was his mother who refused to leave him alone and actually nursed him back to life. Right? You go, whoa, wait a minute.
Oh,
My mother actually was number 11, no, number 12 in a family of 13. Not all of them actually grew up or even
no.
survived at the time of birth. Now, think about that. We say, oh, that's so primitive. It's so horrible. We don't have to worry about that. Well, okay, maybe in 21st century Canada or Europe or even North America generally, we don't, because maybe there have been advances that cured polio and rheumatics and so on and so forth. Science does work on occasion. But when you think about people who survived something that today we would think is unthinkable,
Yeah.
you just
Yeah.
go, and they survived to very old ages. They didn't, just suddenly die at the age of 12. No, and there was no social safety net. Yeah, my mother was an orphan at the age of 12. Both her parents died when she was
Mhm.
12. And she was number 12 of 13 siblings. Her younger sister was 11 when her parents died. And when I think about that, I say, for all of my screaming and whining, you know, about the TTC, it's kind of stupid. When I think about it, and rightly so, it should be stupid. I
Well,
mean,
I actually I call it comparative resilience when I run into people that think we're living in fairly difficult and challenging times right now, irrespective of the world events. I'm like, well, I think you need to do a little bit of historical reference because I argue what our forefathers and foremothers went through would break the vast majority of the current generations.
Yeah.
And I'm talking boomers, Gen X,
Yeah, yeah,
all of
yeah,
us.
yeah.
I'm just
Oh,
not
yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah,
millennials
yeah.
and
Me
slamming
too.
Gen
Me too.
Z.
Oh no.
That
Hey,
the
listen.
majority of humans alive today would be utterly, absolutely
Oh,
unsuccessful.
listen. I am compared to you an ancient boomer, and oh no, oh no, no, no,
Like,
no. Ancient. I mean, we're talking 40s here. Not, I don't mean 40s in age. I mean 1940s is when I was born. And people look at me going, "Whoa!" I mean, people actually existed back then. Yeah, my
yeah,
parents, me. Give me.
yeah,
But
yeah,
we actually have, and this gets us into, I hope, gets us into preparedness because I'm still, I still struggle with the idea of how do we actually act responsibly in the face of multiple expectations that someone else is going to do it. Someone else is going to we don't need to, because someone else is going to do it.
yep,
Yeah, and before we jump into that, I have this wonderful Facebook posting that I just thought was so funny. And so, after listening to his owner drone on for hours, Ralph the dog suddenly realized he was not cut out to be an emotional support dog after all. Yep, Ralph, I don't blame you.
yep, yep. It's so, you see, there's lots of memes of that where you see the picture of the dog's eyes are this
Oh
big
yeah, oh
going,
no, his eyes. No, he was given the
yeah,
glance, the side glance, going, "Nope, I'm
no,
out of here."
not my gig. This is not
No,
my thing.
no.
I,
So
I wrote about something very similar to that this morning on Substack
yeah, I
and
saw.
recorded a podcast episode on it talking about um, we've always been based on a tribal society,
Yep.
whereas our skills get amplified by other people and their resources. And we would bring that collectively to the community, whatever Dunbar's number you want to concentrate on, it doesn't really matter. But the idea is that we used to thrive as a community because we took care of each other. If
Hmm.
somebody was hungry in our community, we simply fed them. We just fed them.
Yep.
When
Yeah.
somebody's house was damaged by a storm or, God forbid, burned down, the community showed up to rebuild it. Now, no, they didn't everybody buy them lumber or something, but everybody showed up with their personal skill sets
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
offer to that. When somebody had trouble, when a farmer became ill, the other farmers came
Hmm.
over and
Yep.
farmed their fields. We had, and there was no invoices exchanged,
Nope.
right? This is just collectively your duty and responsibility to the collective as being a member of society. I argue we've switched that around to where now we have a lens of I have an entitlement to my slice of the pie.
Hmm.
Not that I am required to provide any resources or labor to
Nope.
get that slice of the pie. I am simply entitled to it. And by default, therefore, somebody's responsible for providing for my needs when I have chosen to or can no longer, by actions beyond my control, provide for myself.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
we've morphed into that culture of dependency, which I've spoken about on
Yep.
this chat a
Yep.
couple of times
Yep.
in the past. But we're now in a position of I'm kind of positing that we're getting near that, we're at or very near the breaking point where the default is when you ask the government to do more for you,
Hmm.
you have to give the government more money to do it with.
Yep.
It's not an evil government, not bad government.
No,
It's just
no,
when you
no.
ask somebody to do something for
Right.
you, they
Exactly.
need the resources to do that.
Exactly.
I think we're at or near the point where we as a collective society have provided all the money that we can. There's no more to give to the government.
Hmm.
Yet we, as a collective, are not slowing down our demands for service from the government.
Yeah.
And we're getting very close or at that point where there's going to be a decoupling,
Yeah.
where whether it's an existential crisis or a couple of really smart humans sitting around a table and having that kind of conversation and discussion where we're going to have to stop asking the government to do stuff for us because the resources are dry.
Yep.
But then the question is, would it not? from a human perspective, be easier to revert back or slowly move back to what we used to do,
Yeah.
where the community, and Dunbar's top number of 2,000 people at the tribal level, that we take care of each other. Like I'm not, and I use the example of the food bank. I donate to my local food bank.
Right.
I'm not interested in feeding the people in Toronto.
No.
I don't live in Toronto.
No.
If
Yep.
people are hungry in Toronto, my argument is it's the people of Toronto's responsibility to feed them.
Yep. Yep.
I feed the people, or I help feed the people in my community who don't have sufficient resources.
Yep.
And I don't get an invoice for it. I
No.
don't give them an invoice. I don't expect anything. I don't ask for a task. I just give it because that I see as my duty and responsibility. There's so much. There are certain things, yes, absolutely, that will require big picture intervention.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. But there's much of what the government currently does
Mm-hmm.
that can
Mm-hmm.
be and used to be done by the community for the
Yep.
community.
Yep.
So it can revert back to within our own personal resources.
Yep.
I just don't know whether society realizes we've pushed that envelope or pushed that program to its breaking point.
It gets into some insights. I wrote some notes down around one of my favorite German words, and I don't have a lot of favorite German words, but it's a very difficult language. And as I was doing research at a doctoral level, I needed to learn multiple languages. I had enough trouble with French, never mind German, but that's neither here nor there. That's my problem. So when I think of the zeitgeist, the spirit of the days, the spirit
Yeah.
of the time, that's what it is. Just as you're talking, I'm thinking, we talk about social capital, and we do it in glowing terms, and rightly so. I think it's more a hope and a dream than it is a reality. And I like struggling with ideas, even if the implementation is a bit more than a bit questionable, or at least challenging. I shouldn't say questionable. I think we live in a time of just the way you described it, social commoditization. Everything is a commodity. Everything is a transaction. If I do X, I expect Y in return. And even before we began to record this, we talked about gift giving.
Yeah.
All right. And we don't live in a time or social context where we freely give or accept gifts. It's a transaction. If I get a gift from you, you're going to give a gift back to me. And part of it isn't necessarily expectation on the part of the gift giver. It's actually, and I ran into this over time from people. It's actually a sense of the recipient of the gift that they have an obligation.
Yeah.
And you go, whoa, wait a minute. I'm giving you something without necessarily a counter obligation. It's a free gift. And part of that is a transactional approach to relationships that then leads to a sense of entitlement. Well, if I receive a gift from you, then you are entitled to, and now we're getting into a whole other way of doing things. So it becomes extraordinary when you see a certain level of free interaction among people.
Yeah.
One free, without obligation, without a transactional dimension to it, without a open and giving, without a need to exercise responsibility by countering it. All right. I remember scenes from Big Bang Theory, one of my favorite shows that I still watch, that Sheldon absolutely hated giving and receiving gifts because he calculated to the nickel the value of the gift that he would receive. And then he had to go out and buy something that was
Of
calculated
equal value. Yeah.
to the equal value. And you just go, and it was laughable. But my suspicion is it's actually quite common. That
It's
is
very representative. Yes.
very, very
Yeah. Yeah.
representative. And that's
Yeah.
what made it laughable.
Yeah.
There's a level of motivation and demotivation. If you really want to give a gift because it's something that you like to do without anticipating a response or counter gift, you're living in an odd time. Um,
Yes.
this is not the spirit of the time. One of the postings, I'm not a social media person, but I do love postings because they're so funny. And one of them, and as we're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, that would be so outrageously unusual to think of it, to even experience it. There was a group of farmers. You mentioned farmers. I immediately recall this video that I saw where they were moving a barn. We are not talking a small structure.
Oh, it's yeah. The Amish moving the barn.
Yes, the
Yeah.
Amish moving a barn. It must have been at least 200, 300
Yep.
people picked it up and walked it to the new location. And I went, first of all, it's Amish, which makes it unusual to begin with. Therefore, it's not part of the zeitgeist. We are
Yep.
not all Amish. We don't dress that way or act that way. Secondly, it's unheard of. And it was considered entertainment to watch them do it. And I thought,
Mhm.
okay, this is interesting. There's a level of communitarian response and responsibility that would be considered laughable if we tried it out of an Amish context. Like, what the hell are you trying to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm watching the construction site. We have big construction. We have two towers and townhouses being built across the street. And today they're doing really in minus 300-degree weather. They're doing incredible stuff since yesterday, since I think the beginning of the week or even the end of last week. They're putting in new pipeline for the water and sewer system linked to the building. So there's this massive hole with all kinds of mud all over the place, and these guys wearing so many layers of clothes so that their fingers don't fall off, and these absolutely huge round concrete tubes being placed into the ground, and I'm going, really? You do this in January at minus 3 million degrees? Like, you
Yep.
guys are nuts. And the question is, who's actually nuts? The guy watching it and laughing or wondering why? Or the people who have to do it because this is required? It has to be done now.
Or the people who enjoy doing that type of outdoor work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I hate to say it, you have to enjoy it. You ain't going to go do this because it's something
Oh,
like
no,
going off.
exactly.
It's not vacation.
No, no, you enjoy it. You enjoy being out there, and
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
everybody's individual frame. It's
Yeah.
always so different when you see, people say I couldn't imagine working in a cubicle,
Mm.
right? And some people can't. When I decided to retire from the army, I couldn't work in a cubicle. I was offered basically cubicle roles for the next 12 to
Yeah.
14 years, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't do that. That's not
Yeah.
me. That's not how I'm wired. You and
Yeah.
I crack jokes about winter camping all the time. I can't
Yeah.
do that in a cubicle.
No,
Right?
no,
I'd
you
be
can't.
happy
No.
working outside. No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
such thing as bad weather, just bad equipment.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy.
Yeah.
But that's a frame of life experience, right?
Totally.
You grew up and lived your whole lives in an urban setting.
Right.
You would probably not feel home living in a town of 175 people.
No, I actually lived in Hamilton for 5 years, and after about 2 years, I actually got to see the exact same people doing the exact same things over and over and over again every single day. Say, go to the farmer's market on a weekend. Everybody was in the same booth. Everybody was selling the same stuff. Everybody,
Yep.
and yes, I became friendly. I'm not that much of an SOB, but I became friendly. I said hello to people, never got their names or anything because that's to me a privacy issue. But it was always as genuinely, open as I could be. But after 2 years, by the time the fifth year came, I said, I got to get the hell out of this place. It's driving me nuts. I see the same people all the time. And that's in a city like Hamilton, you know?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
urban experience was becoming too friendly.
Well, you picked the right town. You picked the right city that's not very friendly, Toronto. Like
Yeah, I did. I
right?
did.
You picked the perfect place to
Yeah,
fit that.
yeah. Oh no, I did. I did. It's perfect because I don't need to know anybody and I
And
don't care.
it's the exact opposite of when I lived in the Bible Belt in southern New Brunswick, out in my little rural town that had a church on one side of the 80-kilometer-an-hour highway and a gas station with a pizza joint on the other, and that was the town. You waved because every third car you knew,
Yeah, yeah. And that's not my experience. I can't live
right?
like that. I just can't.
And
It just
and I
drives me crazy.
and I yearn for that. I yearn to
Oh,
be back in the tiny little area where I'm surrounded by 100 people and I know them all.
no, no, I can't. I don't want to know them. Again,
There
it's
you go, right?
yeah, when
So
we think of zeitgeist, the spirit of the times, well, actually, it depends on your perspective, your own culture, how you grew up, where you grew up, the time when you grew up. I mean, we actually don't have a universal
no,
spirit of the time. There's
no,
no
it's
such thing.
my wife and I joke about it all the time. She wants to live in downtown condos right in the heat of the action in the city. I want to live so far back out in the bush, I got to come out to hunt. And so what the two of us did is we settled on a townhouse in the suburbs, of which neither one of us are particularly happy with
Right. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the uncomfortable compromise, right?
That's
So
right. Exactly.
it's hilarious. So you look at all of that, and then you look at life's crazy days that are going on
Yeah.
right now,
Yes.
and you can start to understand why some people look at the same set of events through very different lenses and have
Hmm.
very different
Yep.
conclusions as to what they mean and what is necessary. We've got people that are calling for expanded government intervention in areas. And then you've got other people going, for the love of God, we just need to get the government out of the way, out
Yeah.
of our lives,
Yeah.
and let me do what I want to do.
You know,
And we're all in the same country.
yes.
We're the
Oh,
same group of
totally.
people.
Totally. And it's not a regional,
No,
collective idea. No, no,
no.
we could go anywhere in the country, in any city, any rural area, and people have a totally different opinion of what it is, or totally different approach to what is important and meaningful from a cultural point of view.
Yeah,
Their particular
yeah,
cultural point of view.
yeah.
Which gets into a discussion I had with a partner and colleague yesterday about standard and standardization. And this is a whole other, which gets us into, the give and take argument about government and government expectations or our expectations of what we want government to do in the event that the shizzy hits the fizzy. All right. And one of the things he came up with, he created a new institute that we're going to partner with. And I'm not going to get into the details because it's still a little fuzzy. And he created a standard that actually reads quite beautifully about what it is the organization is going to do. It's really quite nice. And then we got into a discussion on the dysfunction of standardization, because it leads to a defined or predefined expectation that then eliminates the need to be personally, individually responsible. Someone is going to do it. And so when we think of government and they come up with the standards of how they're going to deal with the great unwashed, which is the rest of us, They create a standard which some of us would consider the lowest common denominator. They would consider the widest reach, right? It's not meant for unique instances because it can't be. It's a standard. It's the government's approach. They have a standard approach to whatever. And I ran into this with HRSDC in terms of policies around projects, which are always fun, as well as policies around, the employees and employment situations and what constitutes,
Yeah.
a standard approach, which I always found odd. Except I understand where it comes from because you can't actually come up with an action or a decision based on unique situations all the time.
No, it's necessarily vague.
It has to be. It's so broad in its definition of what is expected that that it has to cover quote unquote all bases, no matter who's in the base, no matter who's at, whether you have
Yeah.
PhDs or you have people who grow their own whatever weed. Let's just leave it at that.
Nice.
Uh, but but what I also find fascinating about that is it lays out an expectation on the part of us. Well, I mean, the shizzy, hits the fizzy. Where the hell is the government, and why aren't they solving this? Why isn't there a solution here? Why haven't they intervened? Why hasn't FEMA come in here and done what it's supposed to do? Why hasn't someone done something to not prevent but deal with the fire that's burning half of, 1/3 of, who knows what the percentage is, of Los Angeles? Right. I know what they're going to do. They're going to do a root cause analysis. They're going to find the idiot who started the fire somewhere in his backyard that then, was taken off by and he or she is going to be blamed for the fire and the deaths of the people who were victimized by the fire. Well, okay, we can't blame it on global warming. You and I talked about this last week. Come on, give me a break.
Exactly.
You know, we had a firestorm created by a fire, obviously, that then went out of control because of the weather. All right. Well, it was minus frickin' 35 yesterday. Okay. What do we do? Do we just stay in igloo at home or what? No, you have to get up. You got to put the right clothes on. You have to go to work. You have to do this. You have to do that. You got to buy groceries. What the hell's your problem? You know, um, we can't just be squirrels or even worse, bears that go into hibernation. We don't hibernate.
No, and I really think part of the constructing a government is a lens that people use. That I see there's generally two. Government, do they construct the rules of the game
Uh,
and enforce the rules of the game
yeah,
and enforce the rules of society? Which
yeah,
means when the shizzy hits the fizzy,
yeah.
it's not the government that's coming to rescue you. The government has set the conditions
Yes,
for everything to be good to go.
exactly.
The
There's the
other
standardization right there.
standardization works in my mind when the
Hmm.
government sticks within we're going to set the rules for the game,
Yeah,
whether that be the legal game, the
that's right.
courts, tort
That's right.
law,
Yep.
whether it be government response operations. What the difficulty is when individuals think the government structures the outcome.
Yes. Yes.
It's that old argument of equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because what everybody views as a successful outcome is going to be quite different, right?
Hmm.
It's that old union argument of I need to be made whole,
Hmm.
right? I need to be returned to my prior state prior to this event. And it has to be somebody's external responsibility.
Yes.
When we frame the question as the government set up the rules to allow you to buy insurance to cover your loss, and you chose not to buy insurance, then it's not the government's job to come in and cover you. If you can't buy insurance,
Ah,
this is another argument. And I've had a debate with a scholar that's on the west coast of the U.S., and he's a textbook editor in the field of disaster emergency management about the insurance situation that they're having in California and Florida, et cetera. And it's insurance needs. We talked about this last week when we talked about the causes, but the whole point is the expectation is right
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
that the norm is when insurance fails for whatever reason, the gap that remains, it's the responsibility and the duty of the public sector to
Mhm.
ameliorate that loss.
Right.
As long as we, the government, and you can look at economic failures and recessions the same way, as long as we believe the government will come in and save the day, it provides no rationale for us to make the tough, difficult choices
Exactly.
in the beginning to mitigate against the reason. The reason we all know that there's an 8 to 12 to $1 value on mitigation versus response money. You spend $1 on mitigation, you save $12 in response. We all know that the data is fairly clear. It's never a perfect story, but it's fairly clear. The problem is that we can't persuade people to invest in something to protect against something that may never happen to us. But the expectation is that when something happens to us, the government will be there. If we adopted a culture that understood that the government was not coming to save us and would not save us in
Yep.
overt manner, like businesses
Yep.
failing people in the
Yep.
pandemic, there'd be no CERB, none of
Right.
that would exist.
Yep.
That would put people in a position where they would have to take on the responsibility of setting themselves and their family up for success in times of disruption. But there's absolutely no requirement to do that now because the benevolent government, whether you're a small business, large business, a bank, for lack of a better term, a major corporation, or society in general, the government continually and repeatedly comes in and
Yeah.
swoops in and saves the day and write big checks that we can't afford.
Yep.
And so, because the government saves us, we won't save ourselves. And so, the argument, the discussion I'm having with this gentleman on the West Coast is maybe we just need to lead people fail.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to just stop bailing out disaster victims. Just
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
If you like in the United States, I'm not an American. I'm not an expert on legal scholar, but in America, when you get a massive medical bill, there isn't a government program to pay it for you, right? You go bankrupt.
Yeah.
So why can't we just let disaster victims do the same thing? You
Yeah.
lose your house, you had no insurance for whatever reason, you lost it all, folks. Write it off, go bankrupt, start again, maybe pick a better place to live. I mean, it's a pretty harsh way,
Yeah.
but until we stop paying the bill for people's bad decisions or inherent lot or unfortunate losses, there's no rationale for
Yeah.
anybody to step up to the plate
Yeah.
and make those hard choices and sacrifices up front.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
none.
It raises some interesting ideas around you mentioned in your blog this morning, podcast about um bowling alone. Interesting. I've never read the book, I'm gonna be honest, but it sounds like a book I should actually get a hold of. Mainly because it's great insight into contemporary society, despite the fact it was written 20 years ago. And I think Bowling Alone is even more the spirit of the times than it was 20 years ago. Um, a society of many virtuous but isolated individuals is not necessarily rich in social capital, basically.
Oh,
That's
not at
a
all. Nope.
that's a direct quote from
Yep.
Bowling Alone. And the sense of isolation itself is not just a sense. One thinks of social media as an opportunity to relate to, connect with people from around the world. It's an opportunity that has failed to make real connections. Oh, okay, yeah. I have 1 million people who follow me.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I don't, but and I don't want
Well, I was going to
million
say that's
people.
pretty
No,
good. Well
no,
done.
no, no, no. I don't, and I don't want. I don't even know how many people follow me on LinkedIn. I'm told there's something like 22,000, but I go, yeah, that's nice, good. Leave me alone. I don't care. It's not how I, float my boat. Okay, it's just
Like your academic impact score.
yeah. Oh,
No,
living
I know. I
guidelines.
know.
Don't even go down there. It's an opportunity using technology to make connections, but it's often not just one way. It's often just a bunch of likes, hearts, da, 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 da. And therefore we get a sense of it. And I'm thinking more of young people. I'm thinking of, the 14-year-olds I know, of which I know very few, but intentionally. But they think that there's a popularity context in terms of statistics and numbers, or at least they'll say numbers, they won't say statistics. And it isn't. I'm an influencer. What the hell is that? Okay, fine. I've made $1 million because I'm an influencer. Okay, that says more about the buying and selling public than it does about anything else. But it doesn't make you a person that actually connects to other persons.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah. It's just this.
real social capital here.
No, exactly. And it's there's no real that's just a measurement tool that people use. And a lot of times it's amplified by people who are successful in that.
Yeah.
Some people who figure out the niche, look at me, look at what I have for followers. And some people are entrepreneurial. I talked to my kinesiologist this morning as he was bending and twisting me around and helping the legs work better. It was basically, think of the entrepreneur, and we were talking about the same thing that the podcast and the article that I wrote around the pandemic hit. How we're actually on or about Matt Gurney wrote a good. I don't know if you follow Matt Gurney. Um, Wrote a good article today on today or yesterday is on or about the time when Wuhan was locked down 5 years ago
Mhm.
in January before they officially, quote unquote, declared a pandemic. A lot of people were furloughed, for to use a good British term, right? They're furloughed.
Yes.
What were different about the few people that realized this was the perfect time to launch a personalized mask business on
Yes.
a drop shipping?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And then look at the 97th percentile who sat on their couch waiting
Yep.
for somebody to fix it
Yep.
so that they could go back to their normal life and they
Yep.
could get their. And then when their money started to run dry, they sat on their couch and demanded somebody to put money in their bank so they could pay their bills so that life could go back to normal when there was this all over. But you had a small core group of people that said, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah.
I can do something to help. I can do whatever. And they stepped outside the cultural norm and they were very, 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 very successful in it. But then you look at how do the people view those people, right? It's not a, oh, yay, congratulations. You
Oh,
did
no,
such a great job. Well
no,
done. No, no, no,
no,
no,
no, no,
no.
no.
You must have exploited people.
Exactly.
You must
Yes.
have done something bad to be
That's
that
right.
good.
Yes. We denigrate success.
Oh yeah.
We denigrate opportunity.
Yep.
We denigrate opportunists. You know what's fascinating about people who did that, and I knew some companies that did that very, very, very successfully, thankfully. And it wasn't that they were importing from overseas, China or whatever. No, no, they were manufacturing. They actually changed their
Yep.
manufacturing to enable them to meet demand as it was growing in an emergency. All right. And you know, we live in a world of what I call ordinary constraints. Manufacturing is done this way. We manufacture only this. And I'll give an example. One of my really close friends, the origins of the Logistics Institute, who's unfortunately died. George was the president of Danzas Canada, and George, Swiss German. And he was also the one who created or positioned Danzas as a freight forwarding company in the Southeast Asia. He was domiciled and his head office was Japan at the time. So he and his wife and his son lived in Japan. Then they came to Canada, and he created the Danzas world in Canada as a freight forwarding company, which was fascinating. He was a fascinating individual. One of the things he always screamed and yelled about, George was one of these wonderful operatic Swiss Germans. You know, when we think of Swiss and we think of them as German, we think they have no emotions. Well, George had too many emotions. And I always thought of him as an Italian. And his wife used to laugh, saying, no, he's German. But he used to just fly off the handle and get, scream and yell. He did two things for me, many things for me. One of which he modeled leadership for me that just blew me away. He had a significant staff in a head office out by the airport. He knew the names of absolutely everybody. He knew the names of their spouses. He knew the names of their children. He knew what schools their kids went to. And he would walk around in the morning with his coffee and greet absolutely everybody. And one day he dragged me along, and I just stood there going, holy
Yeah.
shizzy.
Shizzy, yep.
I just went, wow, this to me is a man who had, he was the CEO of mega companies making incredible amounts of money around the world in all kinds of cultures, who demonstrated what real leadership is. It's about a people-to-people interaction. It's about people. Well, that was one. But one of the things he railed against was Canadian business culture. He said, you Canadians are just sometimes so freaking stupid. And I went, okay, George, I need a little context here. Could you give me an explanation?
Help me out a bit with that one.
Yeah. Help me out. Help me try to figure this out. Well, quite a number of years, well, it would have been in the 1960s, 1970s, I think, even probably 1980s. The Japanese came to the lumber producers in Vancouver, in British Columbia. And they wanted to start a major building project, a series of building projects, where they wanted to build housing. And in Japan, they prefer to build housing made of wood because it's a major earthquake area. So if a house is going to collapse and it's made of wood, more people will live. Some will die, but more people by an average will live.
And wood will bend a little bit better with
it would bend better,
motion.
or even if it falls on you, okay, you might get injured, but you might not die. If it's concrete and steel, you're dead. Okay, it's as simple as that. I mean, very well, Japanese are very pragmatic. So they came to the lumber industry. This is where Canada doesn't quite fit in sometimes for the rest of the universe. I just wonder how we actually survive. They wanted it in metric. Why? Because most of the world, other than the United States and parts of England, and Canada at the time, were imperial. And what the Japanese wanted, well, we need the wood, the lumber from the tree put into, metric system. And the Canadian lumber producer says, no, we only do imperial. We cannot, underline, will not change.
Yeah.
So what did we do as hewers of wood and, toters of water? We sold logs to Japan, and they created a lumber industry of their own.
Yep.
Worth billions.
Yep.
And you go, opportunity. Where is opportunity? It's where you see the unusual, the craziness, the fringe.
Yeah.
It's Steve Jobs saying, I want to put a ding in the universe. Well, Steve Jobs was crazy. How can you even think that way? But he did. I want to put a ding in the universe.
Yeah.
I want to make a difference. I want to have an impact. And so during the pandemic, here we had people who said, we're in a crisis. All right.
Yeah.
We need to have this in place. Let's find a way either to source it and sell it or to make it
Yeah.
and sell it. Obviously, someone's got to pay for the resources, for the purchase, whatever. And there was success. But then you see the large companies, you see the grocery chains slow off the mark to go e-delivery, e-purchase. You know, folks, people have to eat. They cannot come out of the house. It's called isolation.
Yeah.
What could we do? What should we do? How are we going to do it? You
Hmm.
know,
Wonder in today's
oh,
modern technology.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and technology was strong at the time. This was not, oh, we're going to invent technology to do this.
No.
No, it was capable of doing it. There were already, the Amazons of the world already existed. Give me a frickin' break. All right. Well, does that apply to groceries? Okay, yeah,
Good.
it
It
could,
could.
especially since there's a demand and a need because of a crisis, not because of somebody being an opportunist who then, made other people's lives miserable. That was not the motivation. They,
Yeah. I need you tying back to earlier discussion about what we want the government to do in situations like that.
mm,
You look at and I've done some research in the province of Ontario on the structure of rules surrounding business operations during the pandemic. And we stomped all over the entrepreneurial mindset
mhm,
in the sense that whether you agree 6 feet apart was the appropriate idea,
mm.
if 6 feet apart is the rule we're going to solve, you can't then say you have to keep your customers 6 feet apart, but you can only have 10% of your fire occupancy,
Yeah.
right? Like we conflated rules. And businesses had capital and were willing especially the small and medium businesses were willing
Mhm,
to invest capital,
mhm,
make the necessary changes to make
mhm.
their retail spaces safe
Right,
in accordance with the rule.
right.
Yet we broke them because we didn't tell them the parameters. We didn't set the rules of the game as you would want the government to do. The government set the rules of the outcome, which
Yes,
basically said large scale
yes,
companies can
yes,
operate,
yes,
small and medium businesses, you're going to have
yes,
to die
yes, yes, yes,
because we didn't tell the restaurant owner who
yes,
is willing to reorganize his whole layout, get these
yes,
plastic shields
yes,
dropping down
yep,
and doing everything so that he can continue to conduct operations in it with the rules.
yeah,
We didn't do that. And because of that,
yeah.
we have a whole different series of outcomes from the very same set of experiences and event that we all went through. And so now, God forbid, it's going to be a hell of a popcorn and beer moment when the next one comes around. Because if the government thinks it's going to be in a position to impose rules on the business community, the fight they're going to be in for is something I don't think they truly understand from both society and the business community because we've seen what happens when we simply sit back and listen
Mm-hmm.
and keep bouncing around. And I heard a great quote this morning. I was listening while I was on the treadmill. I was listening to the New York Times daily podcast. I don't know if you ever listened to it, but this one was about um, the constant changing of the U.S. government regulations around automobile production.
Right.
You know, pro EV, anti EV, pro emissions, low emissions, back and forth, and the businesses in the middle going, it's not that we don't want regulation. It's just that we want consistent
There you go.
regulation.
There
We
you go.
hate uncertainty.
Yes.
So make the damn rules and then stop changing the
Exactly.
rules.
Yes.
We will
Yes.
adapt, we will retool, we will make the
Exactly.
necessary investments, we'll modify our product line to
Yep.
fit the rules, which
Yep.
gets me back to my overall argument
Yep.
is the success in government is when the government sets a clear set of rules and then stops messing around with them
Yep. Yep.
every couple of weeks. Now, you just look what happened in Toronto with a buddy in his barbecue restaurant. The guy who was a martyr just kept
Yeah.
opening his restaurant, kept getting locked down,
Yeah.
seized, all this stuff. And he was just representative of what everybody else was going through. Like, you keep changing the rules of the game
Yes.
faster than the players in the game can adapt.
Yep. Yep.
And so you're creating more confusion, harm, and pain than you were attempting to ameliorate.
You know, sorry, there's so many areas to think about around just those series of examples. I sometimes delve into crazy things beside talking about Hamlet as a murderer. Um, I'm sure people listening to these podcasts know that you're the rational one and I'm the crazy one. I hope they do, but you're the rational one. Crazy, I don't care. But I came across some interesting quotes from David Hume, the Scottish empiricist, 19th century, 18th century, 19th century. And he actually criticized some interesting things that we do to this day because we're tied into a cause-effect way of approaching life. There is a cause, there is an outcome or an effect. And we actually think in that univocal way. Univocal is a nice fancy word of saying it's a one road from A to B. That's it. And you go, and he said, no, causality has nothing to do with the rational approach to things. And he said, because humans are not rational. He said, what you fail to look at is human behavior. Passions govern human behavior, not reason. And therefore, if you reduce everything into a formula of cause and effect, you have misunderstood how humans behave, how we behave, what drives us, right? And he even goes on to say, the mind isn't rational either. And I'm reading somewhat. It consists of perceptions.
Yep.
When we think in terms of what's rational or reasonable, or whatever term we want to use, we think of it as a standard approach to absolutely everything, right? If it's rational, then everybody must buy into it because it's rational. Aren't we all rational? That makes us human. And the answer is no.
Oh,
We all have impressions and ideas of what's right and wrong, of what is useful and what is not useful, what is acceptable, and so on and so on. And therefore, those impressions and ideas lead to expectations. Expectations are based in a rational approach to things, which then leads us to cause effect.
mhm.
You just underline something that's so critical. The big problem with government, I don't give a damn whether it's big government or small government, tiny government or local, cadre of crazies in the neighborhood, is that we actually expect cause and effect relationships. Right, goes back to gift giving. If
Yep.
you give me a gift, you have cause and obligation that I have to reciprocate. And you go, well, no, not necessarily. But then it leads to something that is so incredible because government, okay, let me backtrack. We live in complex societies. It's complex, folks. I don't give a damn what you think complexity means, but it's complex. You cannot come up with a rule that covers all the bases all the time. It's impossible because we live in complex situations. Even worse is when you come up with a rule and then you change your mind. You go,
Yeah.
okay, folks, we already know the rule doesn't apply everywhere in all instances at all times, despite the fact we wish it would, especially
Yes.
especially when the shizzy hits the fizzy. Oh, it's gotta take care of me. Hurry up. We know deep down inside that's not how it works because it can't work that way. But then when you intentionally or unintentionally or for whatever frickin' reason, there's a New York term, frickin' reason, you change the rules because you think this is more appropriate or better or part of policy or whatever the hell rationale you use, then you've created chaos.
Yep.
And that chaos is what gets government in particular, or authoritarian groups, however you want to define government, criticize, and we throw rocks at them, saying, "You people are idiots. Why you keep doing that?"
Yeah. Why do you keep telling me I'm only allowed to have 12 people, but not 13 for a holiday party?
Exactly, exactly. Now, I've been in discussion with some young newbie process engineers who just graduated and have very, very interesting jobs. One young person was hired by Del Monte. Now, this is of all the mega companies that people just see the name and don't realize just how damn big they are.
Yep.
It's like P&G. Oh, I just buy, toothpaste. Uh-huh.
Yeah, sure.
P&G rules the universe. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't give a damn who is in power in a political way. They are what I call supranational.
Yep.
They exist away from, beyond, and above all government considerations. So tell me what the rules are, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do with your rules,
Yeah.
basically. So Del Monte is similar, although so understated that you would never point fingers at them because, oh, they grow pineapples? No, they own all the pineapples in the world. They don't just grow them, they own them. And they
It's
allow you to eat them
they
because,
vertically integrated the
yeah,
entire system.
exactly, the entire pineapple world. All right. And so they have two divisions. One is the one that we're all used to, especially of a certain age, which is the canned, fruits and vegetables. And then they have a fresh division. And this young person was hired in the fresh to be an analyst. And the analytical concern is focused on a law that was passed by the Food and Drug Administration in the United States. And it was actually passed by Congress. That there is a compliance requirement in the entire food chain from source to shelf in order to determine how to trace back. It's a traceability issue to source in the event that there's botulism in the lettuce or E. coli in the broccoli. Now we're talking fresh here. We're not talking canned. Canned
Yeah.
it's easier because it's got labels and RFI
Lot numbers and everything
lot
else.
numbers
Yeah.
and all that shit. No stuff. Sorry. Whereas broccoli is broccoli. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you take this head of broccoli and
Which
say,
plant were you from?
yeah, where are you from, man? So now with the current government, which wants to be anti-government in so many ways, they are undoing all of the laws, a certain amount of laws that were in place, not because they were done by Democrats, but because they have to put their spear in the ground and say, this is how we work here.
Yeah.
And so the law may actually be dispensed with. Right? Oh, you don't have to do any of this stuff. So, if someone dies of E. coli because of the broccoli they ate that they bought from you, too freaking bad. You're not liable. Well, at least you're not liable because you haven't because you don't need to comply with all of the standards set by the law.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. What's fascinating about this is that Del Monte technically is no longer on the hook, but their customers are saying, damnation, you better implement every element of the law, whether you are legally responsible or liable to do so.
Yep.
And there's a reason for that. You know, who are their clients? Walmart, Kruger.
Who might be tied up and rolled up in the same thing. Yep.
Who is going to be sued in the event that Auntie Mame died of E. coli after she ate the broccoli that she bought or her nephew bought at your store?
Yep.
Okay, so they're turning around and saying, I don't care what the government's saying. I don't even give a damn what the law is. The law sets out a standard that we're going to apply, and I demand that you, as the supplier of the broccoli, comply with that damn law, or
Yep.
else.
Yep. Or in the instance where does the government need that law? And in fact, does not tort situations on their own to require Walmart to demand that of its suppliers, so the system itself, without being told to,
Yes,
uh,
yes,
self-regulates that. I mean, that's a self-regulation argument, but the point is the government has a role in protecting the food source
yeah,
and the integrity of the food source and to ensure that what is sold is safe.
yes.
Or is that responsibility better sat on Walmart's?
Well, I personally, what I think is emerging, although it's a struggle, because I'm involved in this, especially supply chain traceability, uh, identifying the supply chain as a whole chain, WHOLE, and getting people to try to think or make their decisions based on source to shelf kinds of things, which people don't necessarily want to. I put it in terms of the positive. It's not about compliance, it's about quality assurance.
Yep.
Right. So when you buy that jar of honey that's on the shelf and you have you have a QR code that then traces it all the way back to source, you know you're buying, say, Alberta honey, which has not been polluted with Chinese cheap whatever they use.
Yep.
And so I try to convince companies or groups that it's really about not compliance. It's about your integrity and your competitive advantage on the market, right? You now
Yeah.
can guarantee the
Yeah.
quality of your product.
And I'll tie this right to Simon Sinek, somebody both you and
Yeah,
I watch
yeah,
and have read regularly. He did a recent interview and he talked about the change in the type of capitalism that happened at a certain point where capitalism thrives when a business owner wants
yeah,
to create the most robust, best product because their
yes,
product is better than everybody else's
yep,
product.
yep,
And they take pride in that. And that pride leads to a greater market share because my product is better
mhm,
versus a certain type of an economic idea in parts, in some theories of capitalism, where I need to extract the maximum value that the market will sustain while preventing harm coming to my client.
right,
Those are both baker, and Simon was talking about a baker at the time. He's saying, the baker and the butcher in town are creating the best possible product they
yeah,
can because
yep,
they take pride in being the best in what they
that's right,
do,
right,
and their customers always come to the best of what they can do. So they understand their brand value is gone the second they make people sick.
exactly.
So you don't have to tell them to do these 72
Nope,
things.
nope,
They will do it.
yes,
When we move that to, we no longer look at our consumer driven world as a value driven world, but as a price driven world,
there you go.
we go, we go heading right for the basement steps because now we need to heavily regulate
Yep.
organizations that are simply trying to extract the
Yep.
maximum value out of the market
Yeah.
for
Yep.
their product.
Yeah.
We have to ensure that as that quality goes down
Yep.
to make more money, that we create a floor,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, this gets into the whole opening the door of inter Keynesian economics and how far down that road
Yeah.
everybody wants to go. But Simon's point was that when we used to look at providing companies exist to provide great goods and services to solve problems people have,
Yep.
comma, the fact that they can make some money is secondary.
Yep.
That's generally the idea behind capitalism.
Yeah.
The Milton Friedman, which I've
Yeah.
got his book here and I read
Yeah.
some of his stuff, his idea was extracting the maximum value out of the market
Yeah.
to make the most amount of money that the market will
Right.
sustain.
Right. Right.
And this is we see it in your and my history in the supply chain where people are I need to extract the best system out of it so I can get the just in time, the leanest, the
That's
meanest,
right.
the
That's right.
cheapest delivery.
Right.
And then
That's
you
right.
look at our old friend or somebody I don't know I'm meant to went to see Cliff Howard, who used to run the Honda parts warehouse in the city of Toronto.
Yeah.
Um, and he was like, no, we want to ensure that our products are available to our customers when they want them
Yep.
on
Yep.
time. The service means that the supply chain takes a higher price point
That's right.
to ensure we deliver optimal service.
Exactly. You know,
And those are great
yeah,
comparative.
yeah. It just, getting to the point of, bringing closure to our ongoing discussion. That's probably at this point people are saying, okay, when are these two going to shut up?
Eventually.
Eventually we will. It's the what Cynic identified as the difference between capitalism at its roots, which is 19th century, which is based on delivering value. So
Yep.
there's your competitive advantage. So there are two butchers. One used sawdust in order to increase the volume of their product. The other uses flour, the best grade flour. And so we get this all the time. I mean, if you're a pasta eater the way I am, so depending on where the pasta is made, there's totally different flavors. It's not the same around the world, and it depends on who. So it's based on value and competitive advantage based on value, which in the Logistics Institute, without being an advert here, that's our focus on supply chain and logistics. It's about delivering. It's about not delivering value. It's about creating value.
Creating value.
There
Yeah.
you go. And with Milton Friedman in the early or in the 20th century, it's really about maximizing profit.
Yep.
And it's all about profit. It's all about money. And if that actually positions supply chain, especially inside the four walls, as controlling cost of the supply chain, making it as cheap as possible, eliminating all redundant inventory,
Yeah.
go into a lean practice, and then be able to do a just in time, which of course is an invitation to absolute disaster.
Oh, chaos.
I
Absolute
mean,
chaos.
what the frig are you going to do? And by the way, this comes out of quality management techniques in Japan in the automobile industry, where even now they're the ones saying you don't do that anymore. You hold on to inventory.
Yeah.
Why? Well, you get a tsunami and it wipes your frickin' plant out. What the hell are you going to do?
Yeah. Or you don't create, even though it may be more cost effective, you don't produce parts in only one location.
No,
Because if
no.
you produce, especially when you have a integrated automobile industry like we do here in North
Yeah.
America,
Yep.
if you're the only factory that provides seat warmers to insert in seats to every
Oh
manufacturer,
yeah.
and you burn down,
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense.
No,
We
of course
we
not.
want five healthy companies providing great products to all coexist.
And it's interesting. The whole notion of competition is not to get them to deliver or produce at the cheapest possible rate because you know they cannot sustain themselves economically.
No.
They need to make money. All right. So you have to manage the relationship with all five of them.
Yeah.
You have to make sure all five of them are able to sustain themselves economically so that when the shizzy hits the fizzy, God damn it, you can still make automobiles.
Right? It's the same reason why Amazon does well in the US when tornado strikes one of their warehouses.
Yeah.
Not from how they manage it, set that story
No, no, no,
aside.
no. It's a slave
But I
labor.
mean, in the idea that they lose one warehouse,
Yeah.
have sufficient redundancy and product location
Right.
to be able to pick that up pretty quickly and to recover for a significant period of time and continue operations
Yes.
while that warehouse gets rebuilt,
Yep.
restocked, and set
Yep.
back up for
Yep.
operation. Where it should be about value. And I'm going to say we probably don't have time for this today, but I think how do we create a great question is how do we create that value in government?
Oh no, we don't have time for that.
No, but I think
And,
that's a good conversation.
and
How do
I
we
don't.
look at value in government?
I'm going to be blunt, my friend Dr. J. I don't have stamina for that at this time of the day. Uh,
No.
but it is a topic that at
Yep.
some point
We'll
we
park
will
it.
look at and enjoy. And what I would love, especially with a topic like that, is to get people to respond and tell us what they think
Yeah.
government, the delivery of value, the creation of value.
Creation of value, not the
Okay.
delivery, the creation.
That's right. Well,
Right.
but let's think in two ways, two dimensions of value or two opportunities in value. On the one hand, it's delivery of value. All right. Okay. That's the normal everyday. And we want the government to deliver some kind of value without defining what the value is. The other is how do they actually create value?
Yeah.
Now we're in a strategic mindset. We are thinking much bigger than just delivery. All right. It's about delivery of services and products or whatever the hell you want to do. It's really about how do you actually create value?
Yeah.
Not because you want to be patted on the head or given your gold star and your report card as government, but because that's why you exist.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
and on that happy note,
Yes.
this is probably a little more focused than our last one, but
Yeah.
certainly a whole lot of fun.
Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff.